Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another wonderful episode of Watch Me Wrench with your host, Mr. Wrench. So, what are we doing today? You can see I got the lift up in the air. I've got my sliding center jack supporting the rear of the car up. And hopefully today we could get these babies installed. These are ARP studs for the rear. I did the front a while ago, and I'm doing that because I'm getting the car ready for the track. Well, hopefully one day we can make it there. The only thing left to do after this is the line lock, and then maybe a roll cage. But I think I'm gonna wait on the roll cage. Let's see if the car can run into the 9s. Then we get kicked off the track. Well, I think the car is plenty capable of running 9s. But am I capable of driving the car to a 9-second pass? That's the question. Would we make 753 rear wheel horsepower? With that much power in a lightweight car like this, it should be able, with those skinnies and drag radials on the rear, I think it could do it. But can I manage to drive it to a 9? I don't know. We'll find out. So I'm going to try to install these. This is my first time doing this on the rear. I don't have a manual. I'm just going to be winging it as I go along. I don't have any references. I'm just an average Joe, not a professionally trained mechanic. So let's see how it goes. I guess let me get the wheel off first. And let me see how in depth this job is going to be. Alright, I'll be back. There's the part number. If you guys are interested. You're probably not, because hardly anyone watches my videos. Gee, I wonder why. I guess I'm not so charismatic and funny as I thought. Alright, I'll be back. Alright guys, welcome back. So I got the car up in the air. I can't tell you what a convenient tool that sliding center jack is. It literally converts a 4-post lift into a 2-post lift. Just saves so much time. It's worth every penny. Alright, so I got the wheel off. Now the first thing we're going to do is remove this brake caliper. You have two, where are they? Alright, you have one, and then two, you got two 21mm bolts. So I'm just going to take them out, and then we will shimmy the caliper off. And then I will hang the caliper off to the side here with a bungee cord. And that's step one. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so welcome back. We got the caliper off. And I have it just hanging with a bungee cord. I put a rag in between the caliper and the lower control arm. The reason why I do that is because I don't want to scratch these. I love the bright red powder coat finish. So it doesn't hurt just to take a second and put a rag there. Okay, the next thing to do is you want to take off the rotor. So I just have to take off this centering ring, and that is utilized to help make sure that the wheel is centered on the hub area here. Those rings came with these Forge Star wheels. But let me tell you, the last time I tried taking them off, it was an absolute nightmare. They actually get fused onto the hub here. So what I did was, to avoid that, I put some of that, oh gosh, what do you call that? That silver paste. So hopefully it'll just come off this time. You know what the hell is that paste called? It's going to bother me. Can't believe I'm forgetting. Sorry, it's called anti-seize. So the last time I dealt with them, they were fused on there. So then I took them off, I cleaned them, I cleaned the hub area of any rust. And then I put anti-seize on the inside of the ring. So hopefully it'll just come off this time. Alright, so I just got to pull off this ring, and then you can pull the rotor off. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I got the rotor off. Thank goodness the anti-seize trick worked. It just slid off. No problems. Thank God. Literally, you know, I was picking at each one for like 30 to 40 minutes, trying not to break it, trying to get each one off. It was a nightmare the last time. So, the next thing I'm going to tackle, I'm going to try to separate the upper A-arm from the top of the knuckle. Now, I don't like hitting any of the suspension because it's aluminum. So, I'm going to separate it. I'll tap on it lightly with a hammer, see if they separate. If not, I'm going to use this ball joint separator tool I got from a local auto parts store. It's an OEM product. Basically, it'll go something like this. So you'll tighten that nut, that bolt, push down on this lower handle, and then it'll squeeze the ball joint stud up and out of the upper A-arm. I don't want to tear up that boot, so all right, let me give it a shot, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so you have an 18mm nut here that you have to undo. But first I'm going to disconnect this one sensor line. This goes to the wheel sensor. This way I don't mess it up. Get it out of the way. There you go. Now, the ball joint stud, that's this thing here, at the end of it's got like an Allen key slot, because when you turn this nut with a wrench, the stud might spin. However, mine seems to be staying in place. Let me see. Yeah, it's not turning. Alright, so that's just one thing for you to be aware of. You might have to stick an Allen key here. The mine's not spinning in this case. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so something very unusual just happened. I actually got lucky. I just took my mallet. I hit the A-arm right here about 3 times, and it just popped loose. Oh, I love it. I guess the fact that this car only has, what is it, like 8,000 or 9,000 miles? I guess that helps too. Okay, so now that's disconnected. The next thing, you've got this powder tie rod end to disconnect, 18mm nut. You've got the axle shaft nut. This is what, 33mm. And then you got the lower ball joint, but there's absolutely no room to get any tool in there. So you're going to have to tackle this one last. You're going to have to get that axle shaft out of the way. So I'm going to tackle this now. I'm also going to have to disconnect the emergency brake cable, which connects right there. Alright, let me work on this, and then I'll tell you how I did it and how it goes. Again, you could see that the stud has the Allen key opening there. So, just be conscientious when you're undoing these 18mm nuts. The stud might also be turning, so you might get nowhere, so you're going to have to probably put an Allen key in there. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so as I was mentioning before, I ran into the little problem with the steering knuckle. As you can see, as I turn the nut, the ball joint stud is spinning. See? So I took a 6mm Allen key socket, and I'll hold it in place as I undo it. So just be wary of that. All right, I'll be back. Let me tell you, I just got lucky 2 times in a row. I just pushed down on this with my finger, and it separated. I don't get lucky like that. I can tell you where I'm not going to get lucky is going to be on that bottom one. I just know that's going to be a serious pain in the you-know-what to get out. Okay. Okay, so then the next thing, I guess, will be to undo this axle shaft nut. And that's 33mm. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I forgot to film. So the next thing, after getting this nut off, is to disconnect the emergency brake cable. So basically, you could pull it out of the bracket here. And how do you do that is come down here, push up on this lever here. This will move up, and then you could just, the cable goes here, you could just pull it up and forward. So that's pretty easy to disconnect that. So I got those 2 things off. I got the, got the electrical line off, and I got the cable off. Well, actually, I just have to pull it off of there. Okay, there you go. All right. Hang them off to the side, and you can rotate this. All right, let's get to the most challenging part of this job, right down there. All right, let me get to it, and I'll be back. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the axle shaft separated. Basically, you just take them out like this and boom, 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 hit it a few times. They'll come out. So now you have a little bit of room to get some tools in there. Now you got to do all of this work, all because of this one damn bolt back here. And you guys have heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. Auto manufacturers do stuff like this on purpose to deter the average Joe from doing this job. They did the same thing on the front. They put that one bolt. There's 3 bolts. There's 1, 2, 3. 3 bolts that hold this wheel bearing assembly out in place, which is what we have to essentially remove to press out these studs. All because of that, because you have no room to get a tool in there. Nothing. Unbelievable. All right, so this is, what is this, 18mm? So let's undo this, and let's see if I can separate the 2. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so I got the bottom one disconnected. I did not use that. There really wasn't much room to get it in there, and it looked like it might have cut the boot if I tried to use it. So here's what I did. I have the car lifted, you can see. So on both sides I have the arms of the sliding center jack resting on the lower control arms, and that's what's raised the car up and off the lift. So all I had to do was, I took some wood, I put some wood down, I took a jack stand, and I positioned the jack stand underneath the knuckle here. I lowered the car slightly just until these 2 contacted each other, and then I just lowered it like, I lowered the sliding center jack down like just until it was like 1/8 of an inch off. So basically this was holding up, this jack stand was holding up this side of the car, and this was positioned just about like 1/8 of an inch down. So then I just came over here, I tapped it twice with the mallet, and boom, it just came disconnected. So all I had to do was basically have some force pushing up on the knuckle, and with the weight of this and the shock pushing down, just 2 quick little taps here, boom, it just came disconnected. And then I lifted the car, I supported the car back with the sliding center jack. So that's how I did it. So not too bad. So I kind of just had to slide the axle back in place. I repositioned the upper ball joint in place. And that's how I did it. Alright, I'll be back. Alright, so there it is. The knuckle is out with the wheel bearing. Let me just show you what I had trouble with was I kind of had to push the axle shaft all the way in and then like bend it up and like get it in that position because there was no room. So that's basically how like the axle shaft was in the way there. So as you can see, there was no room to get. It's a 21 millimeter socket. I think I said 18 earlier, I'm not sure, but it's 21 millimeter. So I kind of had to push the knuckle this way, turn it this way, take this with one hand and kind of try to hold it as much like out of the way, and then with the swivel get it on there, zip it off with the air gun, and that was how I got that nut off. Alright, let me just leave that there so I don't lose it. I'll put this one over here. Okay, so now we have the 3 nuts on the back. Those are, what are the torque 55 bits. So we'll undo those 3. Then the wheel bearing assembly will come out, and then we can press those studs out. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I got the knuckle in my vise. I took out the 3 torque 55 bolts. 2 of them had a bit of a red Loctite. This one didn't. This bolt came out of this slot right here. It's interesting. So now, and then you just had to undo the clamp. This basically you had to put a screwdriver. Just had to put a screwdriver in between here and here and pry it out. So now the hub assembly will come out, and then I get to use my press. I've had it for like what, 8-10 months. I haven't used it yet. So excited. So this should just slide right out. There it goes. And there's the wheel bearing assembly. Alright, so let's get this set up on the press and we will press them out. Alright, I'll be back. Oh my gosh, I love this thing. So just watch how easy this is. It's kind of a pain in the neck to set this up and turn it, try to figure out a way to do it. You don't want to rest the bearing assembly here. Because what you're going to do is, if you rest here and you have this as your resting point, and as you're pushing down on this, you're going to be creating some deflection, and that's going to hurt the bearing that's in there. So you want to support it from here. But you got to be careful because you see the studs, the heads, so you don't have that much room. So you kind of have to finagle it. Okay, so here we go. Kind of a awkward setup, but it's pretty stable. Done. All right, I'll be back. And then here goes number 3. like butter. And number 4. Love it. One more. And number 5. Done. Love it. Alright, that's how you do it. I'll be back. Okay, so I've got 3 on. I tried doing it 2 different ways, and I was having a little difficulty. One way that I tried, I put the wheel bearing assembly in the vise, and then I put a bunch of washers, and I took a nut and I tried to drive it on, but it just seemed like there was a little too much resistance, so I stopped immediately. I didn't want to force it. I didn't want to damage the threads or weaken the stud. So then I came back to the press, but I was having problems because, let me show you. It was kind of pushing. Hold on, I'll be back. Okay, so the problem I was running into, I was doing it this way. I put a big socket, and then I was just pushing down. But this is kind of thick, and this doesn't get centered over the end of the ARP wheel stud. So the first one I did, it looked like it was kind of going in on an angle, so I stopped. And basically what I did was, to try to get this centered over there, I just took a skinny 12mm socket, and I was then able to get it more centered. Here, I'll show you. So there you see, like that, I was able to get this centered with this centered with the stud, and drive it down and in. Alright, I'll try to film one, show you guys. I'll be back. Okay, here we go. Okay, let me tell you, the new studs go in a lot harder than the old ones came out. And that is because I use this micrometer. These are just under ½ an inch. They're like 0.490, and the new ones are 0.510, so they're thicker. So it takes a lot more force to drive them in. And I had the same problem with the studs when I did them on the front of the car. They were a lot harder to get in than the old ones were to get out. Alright, I'll be back. And here goes the last one. Okay, alright, that's it. Okay, so there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first of all, it's the next day. I stopped after my last clip. All the studs are in. I did, prior to pressing these in, I did clean the surface. I knocked off as much of the rust as I could, just so that all the nuts, just so that all the studs would sit flush. I cleaned this up. I cleaned the emergency brake side up too as best I could. So I'm getting ready to mount this back in here, but first, I don't know if you recall, but 2 of these bolts had some pinkish red Loctite from the factory. So I'm just knocking this off. How am I doing that? I'm just using the a fine wire wheel attachment hooked up to my drill. Literally takes 5 seconds. I also chased the threads on these. I cleaned them out because they had a lot of this Loctite from the factory still in there. And it's important you do this so that you can get a proper torque. If you have debris in the threads, you're not going to get a proper torque. So, here we go. And that's it. It's all off. Alright, so now I will be placing this into here. Now, this could go in, one of 3 ways. Now, I'm sorry, I got a new phone, and the damn thing, when you hit record, it automatically zooms in so much. So I gotta remember to pull the phone back. It's really weird. I don't know why it does that. So, it could go in one of 3 ways, but it has to go in a specific way. So I made a little white mark there, I put a little white mark there. And the reason why is because this wire has to be hung over here on this clamp. Hold on a second. Okay, so if you see there, the white dot lines up with that white dot. See, the wire's got to go over there. If you put it in and tighten it with the wire on to the right, it's not going to work. Probably not going to reach the cable. So, when you're doing a job like this, make little reference marks. And I remember that the one bolt that did not have any Loctite on it was down here. So, and all 3 bolts are the same, so it doesn't look like it matters. Alright, so now I'm going to tighten it and then hopefully get this mounted back on the car. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I've got the 3 bolts torqued down. In my case, for my particular vehicle, it's 96 foot-pounds. That's a lot. Please remember, any torque spec I give is for my particular vehicle. 2012 Corvette Grand Sport LS3 manual transmission dry sump motor. Doesn't mean that it's going to be the same torque spec for your Z06 ZR1 or your C5 Z06 or your C6 Z06, whichever. So keep that in mind, please. And when I look up a torque spec, I usually reference 2 sources, which is what I just did for this. I went to 2 different sources and I saw the same torque specs. Sometimes I'll see different ones and I'll try to find a 3rd source, or I'll use my judgment. So, okay, I guess now we can start trying to mount this back on the car. Alright, I'll be back. Alright, so there we have it. The 3 torque bits are torqued to 96 foot-pounds. Getting ready to install it back in the car. See, I ran into some delays, Again, you had some rust here, so I took a wire brush, took off all the rust from here, from the threads here. I think I'm going to put some anti-seize here, just so it doesn't rust. I also had a whole bunch of rust inside here, inside the bearing, where the axle shaft splines go. So I think I'm going to put some anti-seize. I was thinking if I should do grease or anti-seize. Not sure. Maybe the anti-seize. Maybe the grease will come out and fling all over the place. Also collects dirt. Then another little delay was when the car was on the dyno, it kept spinning the tires. They added more straps, they lowered the tire pressure, but it kept spinning. So then they put some of that, they put a spray on there, an adhesive spray. But then the glue just flung all over the inside of the wheel wells. So I took some Goo Gone and a rag and I got it all off. It came right off. I was real happy. It was all over the frame too, all over here. So it came right off, all of it. So I was happy about that. But that took time. Cleaning this took time. Cleaning out that took time. All right, so let me get this up in place and I'll be back. Okay, so I've got it in place. I've got, oh, this phone is terrible. It zooms in so much. That's as much as I could zoom out. I mean zoom in. So I've got this bottom ball joint stud nut torqued. Now I found two different specs for this. So I went to a third source. So I tightened this to 22 foot-pounds and then turned the nut 180 degrees. So that's how I did it on my car. I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying it's right for your car, but that's just what I did. 22 foot-pounds and then 180 degrees. So next I will tighten this nut for the axle shaft, this for the outer tie rod end, and then this one, the upper ball joint stud nut. Alright, I'll be back. Alright, so I've got the axle shaft nut torqued to 118 foot-pounds. I've got this torqued, and I've got that torqued. For this and this, I found several different torque specs. Actually, I found three. Everything was different. They were kind of the same, but a little different. Okay, so for this, I first tightened it down, torqued it down to 15 foot-pounds. While I was just getting it hand tight, I had to put the Allen key socket there because the stud was turning. So once I had it snug and tight, then it stopped turning. Then I was able to torque it to 15 foot-pounds, then 160 degrees, then 45 foot-pounds. For this, I did that same thing. This was spinning, so I had to hold it with the Allen key socket. Once I had it snug and tight, then it stopped spinning. And how did I know that? Because I put a mark, and after I torqued it, I see that the mark didn't change its position. So for this, I tightened it to 22 foot-pounds and then turned the nut 225 degrees. Again, I'm not saying this is right. This is just the way I did it. I found three different torque specs for this, and I just went with the one I felt was best for my application. So what else? So I got 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything is tight. Oh, let's get the emergency brake cable on, hook up the sensor wire, put the sensor back here, and then put the rotor on, then put the caliper bracket on, and then the caliper. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I've got the emergency brake cable installed. It's that thing back there. Goes in place here. Got the wheel sensor plugged back in. I threw the rotor back on. And then we just have 2 bolts for the caliper. And then we can put a wheel on. So let me get to it and I'll be back. Alright, ladies and gentlemen. Brake caliper, rotor on. The 2 bolts are torqued to 125 foot-pounds. If you recall earlier, I said, it's important to clean the threads and chase the bolt holes. Well, I cleaned the threads on the 2 bolts, I got off all the old Loctite. Then I put fresh blue Loctite because I had blue Loctite from the factory. But the bottom one was giving me a hard time. So the bottom bolt, I don't know where the hell it is, back here. So the bottom bolt, don't know if you can see it, the bottom bolt would turn, then get loose and then tight, loose and then tight. So I took it back out and there was still a lot of the old dry factory blue Loctite stuck in the threads back here. So then I got it out and then they went in smoothly. Now I can no longer use the little black lug nuts I had previously. I have to use different ones, and I have them up here on the front. I don't know if I've ever showed them. These are Gorilla lug nuts. These are they're not cheap. So on the front I have these Gorilla lug nuts. They're not cheap. They're about $100. So I bought a set of 20 for $100. So I'm gonna have to use those on the rear. Not a big deal, but that's something you're gonna have to change. The lug nuts you're using are probably not going to fit any longer. Okay, I got the wheel on. It went on, no problems. The only thing is that, they're so long. Once you put the wheel on, normally you can rest the wheel while you put on. But because they're so long, the wheel wants to tilt, and these could scratch your rim. So you got to be careful with that. I stuffed the rag like here all around, jammed it in tight while I ran and got the lug nuts. So now I'm going to start it, put it in gear while it's still off the ground. Make sure I don't hear any clunking noise. And one side is done. Alright, that's it. She works. This was not an easy job. I think I got so many tools and such a mess. Wow. The hardest part of this job is getting the lower bowl joint stud nut tightened and loosened. So here's how I was able to get it tightened. Forget about using a 3/8. You got to use, forget about using 1/2 inch sockets and extensions. You got to use 3/8. So you can get like a smaller socket, a smaller swivel, smaller extension, and then you could put an adapter to a 1/2 inch. So this is how you got to get that bottom nut on. I assume maybe some guys pull out the axle shaft, pull it out, then drop it down to tighten it, but it wasn't working for me. So that's it. You saw it engaging in forward and reverse. I hit the brakes, everything worked, no noise, no funny sounds. So it took me 2 days. I didn't work 8 hours in 8 hours. I did like 4 hours in 4 hours. Now I just got to do the other side. Yippee. All right. Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm working on the passenger side now. I wasn't going to film unless I ran into some problems or if I came up with some tricks. So the upper ball joint's not one to separate, and I really don't want to hit it too much with a hammer because it is aluminum, and you're going to wind up damaging it, and it's pretty much going to absorb the impact, and you're just going to spread the load. So I'm using the ball joint separator tool. So just trying to show you how it goes. I carefully, with a screwdriver, I lifted the boot so not to tear it. So you can see how it's under there. And now I just have to crank down on this bolt and it should separate. Let me see if I could put my camera somewhere and you guys could see it. Alright, here we go. Let's see how it works. I've never used it before. Boom. Wow. Pretty good. And I didn't damage the boot. Alright. Alright, so this is what I was talking about earlier. I take some weight off of the suspension and I lower the car onto the jack stand. I just put a piece of wood there so I don't mar this knuckle up. So as I am raising the knuckle up, you know, the suspension wants to go down. Usually just by tapping it, it comes apart, but didn't want to come apart this time. Alright, so let me just work on the bottom one. Well, actually, I took the nut off here. Alright, well, this is just repetitive. I'll see how it goes down here. Alright, I'll be back. Alright guys, welcome back. So the car's all done. I put my drag radials on there. I'd like to take the car out and I'm going to put it through its paces. I want to do some practice launches. I'd like to do a burnout. I just don't know how the hell I could get any of this on video. And I don't have like a GoPro with a suction mount that I could stick to the car. But anyhow, so the car's all done. Actually, you know what? I'm going to drive it, then I'm going to come back. I'm going to check the torque on the lug nuts just in case those studs moved a little. Then I'll take it out and then I'll beat the hell out of it. I'd like to give you guys one on video like that. I just don't know how I could capture it on video. It looks pretty badass, doesn't it? Alright, so that's it. So listen, thank you for watching. It wasn't the hardest job. It just took me a while. You know, I couldn't work on it, you know, full 8-hour days. I could only do a couple hours here or there. So in total, I probably spent like 4 days doing it. But again, I probably did 3-4 hours here and there. And anyhow, alright, so that's it. Enough rambling. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it, and all that other good stuff. Thank you for watching. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.